Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to welcome you to the next session in digital transformation in government. Joanna Murphy, who is Director IT Audit at the Office of the Auditor General in Canada, is going to be presenting on modernizing procurement of complex IT solutions and some of the audit findings for that. I'll let her give the presentation. In the meantime, I've had the privilege of working with her in the ISACO organization for many years, and it's been an absolute pleasure. um, she's passionate about serving Canadians, okay, by using her expertise in technology and audit to make an impact for Canada's future. Joanna indeed is a team builder who rallies stakeholders towards a common purpose and an innovator that identifies opportunities for the federal government to deliver better services to Canadians in an ever changing environment. She has tabled over 10 IT audit reports to Parliament, including IT shared services, federal government call centers, and procurement of complex IT solutions in 2021. Prior to joining the Office of the Auditor General in 2010, Joanna worked in the private sector for 13 years as an IT security and privacy analyst. Joanna is married with two teenage sons and loves world travel, road biking, downhill and cross country skiing, and backcountry camping. And without further ado, Joanna, over to you. I'm looking forward to this presentation. Cheers.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, I really enjoyed the time that I served on the board. So if anybody is interested in serving with ISACA, I encourage it. So thank you for coming to the presentation today. It's late in the day, and I know I'm looking forward to the next presentation. So today I'm going to present to you some of the audit findings of my last audit that we tabled in February of this year called the Procurement of Complex IT. And Bob had asked if I had a topic related to transformation. And I said, well, does it count that, I looked at modernization of procurement? So he thought that it was good enough. So here I am. So let me just talk a little bit about the OHE. So some of you may know that we have a new Auditor General, Karen Hogan. She's been with us for a year now. And she also brought in a new vision and mission that I'm really quite excited about. So our office is also undergoing a transformation and modernization. And our new vision is to bring together people, expertise, and technology to transform Canada's future one audit at a time. So I really love that, one audit at a time. And so what we do in the office is that we're an independent auditor. We are an officer of Parliament and we table our chapters in the House of Commons, and our boss is Parliament. Um, in a nutshell, we do performance audits and we do financial audits. The financial audit side is to provide attestation to the Public Accounts of Canada. And then on the performance audit side is where you get the audits such as the procuring of IT. And within our performance audit practice, we have various portfolios, which will examine various topics from anywhere from agriculture to indigenous to IT. So I'm the director of IT audit along with my colleague, Gabriel Lombardi, and we table chapters related to IT topics. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our upcoming audit. So I'm going to take this opportunity to offer you to provide some input to me. So upcoming audits that currently I'm working on one, and the benefits delivery modernization, which I really enjoyed the presentation from Vesna Petrovic from ESTC. So the benefits delivery modernization is a very large undertaking, and my colleague Gabriel will be doing an audit of that initiative and tabling the results in fall 2022. It's currently expected for October 22. And I'm currently studying the topic cybersecurity of personal information in the cloud. So at the end of my presentation, I have my email address. And so I'm putting the offer out there to everybody who is in government, you work in government, you work for government, you consult government, to send me your thoughts on what are risks that you think we should look at, what are valuable areas that you think that the OAG can look at to make an impact. So that's my shameless plug for my audit. And so over to the agenda. So what I'll cover today is, first of all, just explain to you what is Agile Procurement. I'll go over the audit and the main findings. And in there, I'll sprinkle in some I guess, tips for auditors, because this is the ISACA organization. So I also brought out points that I thought that the auditors might be interested in. And then, of course, last is the government response, which, makes my job the most fulfilling, is when we can see change happening. All right. So first of all, you might wonder, why did we do this chapter? Why would we want to audit procurement modernization? Well, at the time that we started this audit, there were 21 large IT procurements underway, valued at over $6.6 billion. And also, we had just come off of tabling a chapter on Phoenix, building and implementing Phoenix. And in there, it was very obvious to us that major IT projects or IT solutions are very complex. There's frequent change in technology. The business needs are vast. There's ambitious timelines. And also there's need for technical expertise. So we all know that procuring something like this is no easy task. So, that's kind of the backdrop. Also in 2017, the Prime Minister's mandate letter to the Minister of Public Service and Procurement Canada was to modernize how government procures IT systems. And since then, both PSPC and Shared Services Canada introduced initiatives such as Agile Procurement. So we thought it was a good time to take a look at how procurement modernization was being carried out, whether the government was on the right track, and perhaps we could provide some insights into improvements. Okay, so first of all, let's try to define Agile procurement a little bit. One of the hallmarks of an Agile procurement is that it's iterative. And I think that most of you are familiar with Agile development, Agile software development, but taking those concepts into procurement is where you see this iterative process where you can course correct as you're going. So take, for example, in a traditional procurement, which is linear, where you may award one contract to one supplier. An Agile procurement, in contrast, is one where you have bits as you go along. So you may have prototyping, piloting. You may have multiple vendors that are working together to try and come up with possible options for what the final contract would be. So in a case like this, you have a very collaborative environment. So you have the department. So within the department, you'd have the technical authorities, the procurement team, business owners, the end user working shoulder to shoulder with private sector suppliers. And so essentially, this type of Agile procurement is most amenable to those very complex solutions, software and consulting services, where you don't exactly know how to solve the problem. You know what your problem is, you know what your business needs are, but it's such a gnarly issue and problem that you don't know how to solve that until you put all those heads together and you figure things out. And so what you have is possibly examples where you have uh, companies that would bring a software solution and say, well, here's a possible solution. Let me show you how we could do it possibly this way. And in these agile procurements, you would have opportunities to try different solutions and then move on. So I'm going to go through the overview and of the audit and the main findings. So first, the audit period was from April 2018 to the end of August 2020. But of course, given the projects that we looked that were in scope, we of course went further back to the genesis of when some of these programs and initiatives had started. So the procurements that we included in our review were the next generation HR and pay system, which is expected to replace Phoenix, the benefits delivery modernization program, which is planned to deliver the new EI, CPP, and OAS, and also the workplace communication service, voice over IP telecommunications project. And so we chose these projects because they each used elements of agile procurement. The voice over IP project was more of a traditional one, but they still used what was called a smart procurement process. So all three of these used elements of an agile procurement process. They were very complex government-wide initiatives that used both software and professional services. And also, most importantly, they had a high impact on Canadians. So what was our audit objective? So essentially, we wanted to see whether these organizations were carrying out their procurements with the expectation to achieve business outcomes. Were they going to achieve business outcomes and how they were carrying out their procurements? And then secondly, we wanted to see if while doing these procurements in an agile way, are they still able to follow through with their commitments to fairness, openness, and transparency? So I'll just say that in this presentation, I'm not going to talk too much on the second part of the audit objective. We could talk about that in another venue, but I won't be talking too much about the fairness, openness, and transparency. Okay, so what were the main findings? So I'll just say that overall, for this chapter, it was a positive message. So overall, what we found was that the departments were making good progress in implementing agile practices. So, if we wanted to step back and say, okay, mandate letter comes out, initiatives are rolled out, is the government implementing these wholeheartedly, and is it going well? Overall, we're saying it was a good progress. However, there were areas that we found that we could see areas for improvement. So, for example, training, and I'm hearing that over and over in a lot of the presentations in the last day and a half about needing sufficient training for these new complex ways of procuring. Other things that could be improved are the collaboration with suppliers, and also the guidance and training that were given was not sufficient. And lastly, there were opportunities to improve and strengthen governance. So I'll go through some of that later. And then on the aspect of fairness, openness, and transparency, we found that the procurements needed improvement in using better tools such as data analytics to identify procurement and integrity issues, and then the tracking of fairness issues and the use of the fairness monitor, the information was not sufficient. Okay, so I'm going to cover, I'm going to highlight some of the areas and then also discuss some of the audit tips. So, on the good news side of things, what were we observing when we looked at these procurements? As an example, next generation, what we observed was that they were working closely with specialists. They worked with vendors. They did prototypes. They knew that there were very complex pay actions that needed to happen. And so they used compensation advisors, payroll advisors to test out what they call try before you buy. And so this way of understanding what the user needs were, we call it user design, right? User-centric design was a way in which they were able to better unpack, like, what is this big problem that we're trying to solve? How can we make sure that this next solution that we buy is going to be able to pay federal public servants? So, and even in a later phase, next generation team, they recruited 200 employees from different groups to test these software packages to make sure that they could use it. So this was, a positive change, and we found this to be encouraging. And so some audit tips. So if you're say you're asked to audit a large initiative, and part of that includes procurement of this large initiative, don't go looking for a business requirements traceability matrix, because in an agile procurement, it's not about having a technical requirements list that you check off to ensure that when the RFP comes out, you're not going to be rating the technical requirements for business requirements. It's a iterative process, and it's very much focused on the outcome. And how are they rating these in these procurement processes is oftentimes they'll rate it based on demonstration of an outcome. So for example, they may say to a number of software companies or solutions providers, show us an example of how you would pay fishermen. This is the outcome. We need to pay fisher people that are seasonal employees, and they need to be paid in such a way. So then you would have various vendors come and demonstrate how, using their software, they would do it. And so the rated requirements are more so on demonstrating how they can fulfill those outcomes, not so much a list of business requirements. Okay, and so insufficient guidance and training. So in this area, what we found was that there was an agile procurement playbook that PSPC had, but it was the beginning. It was a beginning product that just didn't go far enough. And what we recommended was that they keep adding to it, improve that, and provide more crunchy, usable tips and practices that procurement teams, procurement authorities could use as a guide. We did look at, I wanted to just say that we did look at other examples worldwide. One example, for example, would be the US Department of Defense, where they rolled out Agile Procurement in how they would procure for the Department of Defense. And so, they had an example of a very comprehensive type step-by-step playbook for guidance for contracting employees. So this we thought was an example of how governments have implemented good guidance and tools. So an audit tip is that the procurement team and the knowledge of the procurement team, and perhaps they might reach out for technical authority help as well. It's critical that they are knowledgeable. Um, so we didn't really look at that in particular. Like we're not auditing so much whether they were knowledgeable, but I'm just making a point here that um, when carrying out these very complex audits, what's really important is that the knowledge of the procurement team or those that they bring on to help with the procurement, it's really important that they have that technical knowledge because for really two big reasons. One is when you're co-creating with private sector, you need to really understand the lingo. You need to understand the language. You need to understand the products that are out there in order for it to be productive. These agile procurements happen very, very quickly. And so you need to stay on pace. The other thing that's very important is if you're not aware of the products that are out there, the technical capabilities of the different products out there, you may not be able to keep up for one thing. But the other thing is that you're working elbow to elbow with multiple vendors. And if, let's just say, they might want to be selling you things, you may not have that, the ability to call them out on that and say, I'm not sure that I really need that specification, or I'm not really sure that I need that special feature. So it's just a tip, maybe good audit areas to look into. Okay, so when it comes to governance, I'll say that when we looked at the Phoenix system, a lot of the problems there had to do with governance and decision making. And so in this procurement audit, we found that there were still opportunities to strengthen governance. So what we found was that clear governance structures, clear accountability, and the involvement of business owners and end users in the decision making was an area that could still be strengthened. And so one of the audit tips that I wanted to talk about was about when does governance begin? So I think one of the things that we found as almost like a throwback of legacy type thinking is that governance within a project, that's very mature. So as soon as you have someone said, okay, we have a project, let's put the project team together, let's set up the governance, that is, I'll say, mature. The thinking around that, the project offices in government are well versed now on setting up governance for that. But when you have, when you're doing an agile procurement, a project is actually born like right from the day that a business case is presented. So as soon as you have, we'll say TB sub and request for dollars to solve a problem, that's, your business case has already been put forth. And someone has already decided we need to buy a thing to solve this problem. And that's the point at which governance starts. And as you're running a agile procurement, you're going through critical phases in which you're making decisions. For example, is this a system that's going to be on-prem or will it be in the cloud? Those have very far-reaching far-reaching impacts as you go along. So you don't want to make important decisions up front that impact later that didn't include the important decision makers. So just as an observation, keeping in mind that governance needs to be set up right from day one when you're doing an agile procurement. Okay, and I'll just touch a little bit on data analytics because this is the crowd that's maybe interested in this. So one of the things that so we wanted to follow up on data mining and data analytics because in 2017 we did an audit of managing the risk of fraud at PSPC. And one of the recommendations that we had was that they should implement data mining and data analytics in order to be more proactive to identify procurement integrity issues. And so, here we were in 2018, 19, 20, and we wanted to follow up on that. So we looked both at PSPC and Shared Services Canada, both of them being the procurement authorities, contracting authorities for large dollar value of IT. So what we found, unfortunately, was that there was limited use of data analytics. And so I'm sure many of you here are much more versed than me, but if you are able to use the database of the rich amount of data that we have on procuring, you can implement data mining and analytics to identify red flags for the potential occurrence of fraud. Things such as bid rigging, contract splitting, inappropriate contract amendments, inappropriate sole source contracting. But unfortunately, PSPC did say that they had issues with the data. It was fragmented, held in different places across government, and also in different databases in branches. And of course, they didn't have common identifiers. And so it was not possible to implement in a productive way the data mining and analytics unless they cleaned up the data. Okay, so this is my most favorite part, which is the change that we saw then. So this chapter was tabled in spring, and I did appear at Parliament. I think it was in April, and so it was a good. The departments all accepted the recommendations, and you could read the full chapter and the recommendations on our website. But I'll go over some of the highlights of things that we saw improvements and change. So PSPC then, in response, they implemented or established a new innovation and Agile Procurement Center, and this is to support contracting officers and their clients as they're doing their Agile processes. Also, they are going to develop a formal Agile training plan, and also same for Shared Services Canada. And then lastly, TBS, also they committed to completing a reset. They were working on a policy reset for the contracting policy family, which happens to be decades old. And this will include a new directive on the management of procurement, which would outline more requirements for how to carry out, not how to carry out, but directives on requirements for outcomes-based Agile approaches. Other changes that we saw is a new governance framework was signed off for the next generation HR and pay, and this would make it clearer for decision-making and clear roles and responsibilities. And then also PSPC is going to establish a more operationalized plan for their data analytics and data mining function. And also they're going to be consulting stakeholders when they're developing guidelines on how to do anomaly detection. And then also SSC is testing an AI prototype to explore how they can use data science for surfacing potential procurement integrity risks. So this is all good change. And so we're happy for the responses. And I think that, yeah, so that would be the end of my presentation. So thank you very much. And this is my email. please send me any comments that you have. And earlier I had said, please send me any information or impacts that you want to share with me that we can consider for scoping my next audit on cybersecurity of personal information. And if you have suggestions for my colleague Gabriel on the benefits delivery modernization, you can send them to me too. I'll send them to him.
Well, thank you very much, Joanna. It was greatly appreciated. Um, I think we don't take procurement seriously enough, and I think agile procurement is going to be a step in the right direction because a lot of digital transformation is hindered by not being able to acquire the necessary resources to move forward. Now, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions have been lit up, and if you have any questions, please put them in right now. And one of the questions was, where do you find the reports? I just replied, the Treasury Board, Office of the Auditor General, or sorry, the Office of the Auditor General website is just, it's full of chock-a-block full of information. Just Google Office of the Auditor General Canada, and you'll get the site right first hit, and you'll be able to get that. So I would, it has some good learning material, and it also has a lot of lessons learned in past audits. Now, the other question I have right now is uh, requirements. And, uh, you know, like I said, I think that what happens is they don't have that there's a lack of requirements management, a lack of concepts and prototyping. And that was part of the visualization. We'll get into that a little bit tomorrow. We've got a really good presentation from D&D on prototyping, but they say that 70% of the projects failed due to poor requirements, and the whole idea of conceptualizing, prototyping, and the like is meant to refine requirements so that people really know what to procure. Do you have any comments on that, Joanna?
Yep. So yeah, I absolutely. I think that with these types of complex problems that you don't know how to solve, I think that and this is what we were auditing for is you know the departments call it outcomes based audit. And what is the outcome you're trying to achieve? Well, you're trying to pay public servants, different kinds of them, coast guard, fisher people, like there's many types, retirees benefits. So um, they know what the outcome is, they know what the user need is, but they don't really know what the list of business requirements are. So absolutely what we were looking for is, are you going to be able to pay these people in the end? And so what we were seeing was, yeah, definitely it was that iterative refining process to figure out what exactly is it that we need this thing to do. And in the end, if it's going to be able to pay the people that we need to pay on time and accurately, then that's really what we were looking for. Um, we didn't do like a full-on audit of like a traceability because I think that kind of defeated the purpose of us looking at whether they were going to come out with an outcomes-based result.
Okay. Um, that's good. That's good. Sorry, I'm just going to get, I'm just going through the system here. We got traditional procurement mechanisms separate buyers, procurement offices, and vendors to achieve fairness and objectivity. How does a more collaborative approach still achieve fairness and objectivity evaluation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you know, maybe I should have talked more about it in my presentation, and I could talk offline about it. But you know, we wanted to look at that as the flip side because, in fact, we identified that as a risk. So you have a situation where you are working like elbow to elbow with private sector suppliers who, you know, on a daily basis, you're talking to them and they're whispering in your ear at all angles. So the question is, how do you do that in an independent way? Like, can you all of a sudden become sidetracked and, you know, favor or be influenced? So we did look at what controls do you have in place to ensure the fairness, openness, and transparency? Absolutely, really important. And which is why we said you're changing how you're procuring. Have you also looked at how you change controls around that? And so that's where we found that there was a need to improve on, you know, the use of the fairness monitor was, in our opinion, it was um, a lost opportunity. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity to use the fairness monitor more thoroughly. A fairness monitor is an independent hired individual that kind of follows the procurement along and oversees things. The other thing we found was that procurement authorities, so contracting authorities, in how they documented fairness issues, like maybe it's a complaint, maybe it's a conflict situation. What we found in our audit was that it wasn't always well documented. So it wasn't clear to us. They couldn't demonstrate how they overcame or resolved fairness complaints and issues. So um, definitely an area to improve on.
Well, potentially artificial intelligence could help you with that. I know when I was in defense and we were doing internal audit, some of the RFPs had just basically copied a website and all the specs for one particular vendor. And in those days, it was a little bit more straightforward to catch. But now this is where AI can stop that before the RFP even hits the street. Okay, for that. Um, okay, the next one. Sorry. Do you speak with vendors on how they like the agile approach and see more value?
Yes, we did. So we carried out a survey of all of the vendors that participated. So each of the three procurements that were in scope, we gathered all of the vendors that participated in any phase. And we did survey them. We also talked to some of them. Not everyone wanted to talk to us, but we talked to some of them. And yeah, we did ask them. And we talk about it in the chapter. Overall, they thought that it was a great effort. So they like that the government of Canada is embracing the spirit of it. They also felt that it wasn't quite an agile implementation. So, my interpretation of that is that, good job, government's doing a good, they're on the right track, but there's ways to better improve how they're carrying out these agile procurements.
Okay, thank you. And the next question. Okay, they're starting to pour in now. Are there funding or findings or themes from this procurement audit that the OHE has also consistently identified in your past audits in the federal government? Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that I touched on governance. I think that, yeah, the government of Canada is forever working on governance. So we've highlighted on a number of occasions the need to improve governance. It's not easy. It's really not easy, especially in IT solutions. Complex. It's government wide. There are many departments included. Um, I don't pretend to think that it's easy, but that is, a common theme that we're hearing. The other one I mentioned was we followed up on the need to implement data mining and data analytics. So that was from our 2017 audit. Um, Training is another one. So I didn't mention it, but there was an audit. Sorry, it wasn't an audit. It was a study done in another parliamentary committee on small businesses and support to, I think it was support to, it's a committee, a parliamentary committee that supports small business. And they came out with a study with recommendations to improve training for agile procurement. It actually was specifically training to employees to carry out better agile procurements. And So then now we're looking at it again, and we're seeing that the government still needs to improve on how to equip their employees to do these really complex procurements.
Next question is, which government, have you seen any government departments that really utilize data analytics software effectively? And which type of softwares are used, which you've seen, if you're allowed to speak to specific vendors?
Um, well, we haven't done any audits on that. I can't answer that question. We haven't audited that. It's not a topic that is coming up, so I haven't done any research on that. Yeah, I can't answer that.
Okay, fair enough. Let's get the next one question up in the queue. You spoke about a complex IT procurement with software and professional services, and your example of iterative prototyping is great for software procurements. Do you see differences for complex IT procurements that are professional services only?
Well, we did not. So the focus and the scope of this was, we called it complex IT, and how we defined it was both software and professional services. So
Okay.
yeah, we didn't look at just professional services. So we didn't study that.
Okay, fair enough. No, that, that's good. Sorry, I'm just moving along. There's just a couple of questions in the queue. In the course of audit, did your team observe any good practices of managing IT solution testers via iterative approach and capturing segmented test results and analyzing them at the broader level for meeting business needs? Did you test the transitions and the increments for business capability,
No,
business outcomes?
we did not test it to that detail.
Okay.
So no, we didn't test that.
Okay, fair enough. And let's see now. Defense procurement is more complex and bigger in dollars. Would it have helped to include in the scope D&D procurement issues?
We, at the beginning, we considered including them in scope, but then what we found was that in PSPC, they have a whole other branch that manages procurement for D&D. So we felt like it was almost like a whole audit in and of itself. Our audit criteria, their methodologies and everything would be different. So it was too difficult for us to combine the two. But as you probably know, our Department of Defense portfolio, they love to do audits of defense procurement. So it's definitely on their radar.
Okay, sorry for all those people that aren't, the non-Canadians. D&D is Department of National Defense. So they're talking about, did you look at defense audits as well in your complex IT projects? Simple answer is no. Okay, and because there's another group that focuses in on D&D, and there's quite a few audits and having been done there. Well, listen, Joanna, that was a great presentation. Thank you ever so much. I think you've opened the eyes to saying that digital transformation, especially in government, has to be cognizant of the procurement issues that are involved with that. So without further ado, thank you. And also, I'm recommending for the group, take a few minutes, and then afterwards, I would log in and take a look at the Communication Security Establishment, the Cyber Audit Framework. So thank you very much for your time, folks, and thank you very much, Joanna, for a great presentation. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Bob.
And now we'll have the latency wait. Thank you very much.